You're listening to Change Your POV podcast, episode 22.
And chances are you're not serving in the military.
Right. If you're chronically mentally ill, unless you have a really cool mental illness. But, okay, thank you for laughing. I was attempting to be humorous, and then I realized
I got
nothing.
No, I got that. I was like, you just described like me and all my buddies.
Right. I mean, right. If you're a sociopath, you can get into the military. But
we probably all have a little bit of that tendency, but
yeah.
Welcome to Change Your POV podcast, helping you navigate transitions in your life, like entering and exiting college or the military, changing jobs or careers, and providing you with the coaching and mentorship needed to help you advance in your personal or professional life. Sometimes all you need is to change your point of view. Now, here's your host, Eddie Lazary.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Change Your POV podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Lazary, and today we've got a special guest. His name is Keith Howard. He lives here locally with me in New Hampshire. He is the executive director of a veterans transition house called the Liberty House. And this is a special episode. It's a little bit longer than normal, but that's okay. From the time this was originally recorded until now, Keith has made his way into talks and interviews with CNN and others. Kind of a big deal going on around here, especially this time of year with the New Hampshire primaries right on the horizon here. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a heads up of what's going on, Donald Trump and his folks were out here in New Hampshire recently, and Liberty House was named one of the veterans organizations to divide $6 million that were raised by Trump's counter program to the GOP debate. So we're not sure entirely exactly what's going to happen with that, how that fund or those funds are going to be divided, and that's kind of why Keith was asked on to CNN to be interviewed about that. So I have the links to that CNN interview in the show notes for this episode at changeyourpov.com/episode 22. I hope you enjoy this interview with Keith Howard. Without further ado, let's jump right into this interview with Keith, myself, and Bennett Tatton. It's a good one. Today we have Keith Howard. He is the executive director of Liberty House. He refers to himself as the luckiest man on the face of the earth because of his chance to help fellow veterans recover from substance abuse, bad breaks, and even worse choices. A formerly homeless veteran himself, Keith began his career as a military journalist, moving on to radio news, teaching school administration, and novel writing. Keith holds a bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in school administration. The Liberty House has been in existence for more than a decade in Manchester, New Hampshire, and has been providing a safe, supportive, substance-free housing community for veterans transitioning out of homelessness. Welcome to the show, Keith. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Bennett.
It's good to have you on here.
Yeah, it is really, really good. So I was just kind of at work one day, and I was kind of checking out my Facebook page, and all of a sudden I see an article come across from a local news outlet in our area, the Union Leader, and it caught my eye. And the title of the article was Keith Howard: Why Liberty House Turned Down Money from Uncle Sam. So we're going to get into that story in a little bit, but before we do, I'd really like to kind of hear a little bit of your backstory, kind of where you come from, some military experience, and how you came to be where you are now.
Okay. Well, I grew up here in New Hampshire in a small college where I graduated from high school, third from the bottom of my graduating class. And I was really disappointed to have gotten a D plus instead of a D that last semester, so I could have been at the very bottom. But I also am one of those people who does really well on standardized tests. So I had very high SAT scores and absolutely no accomplishments to show for it. So back in 1976, when I graduated, college is not dying to have me, and my parents, neither able nor willing to pay money for me to go off and, maintain my gentleman D's at college. So I went into the Army. I was 17 when I went into basic training. Um, and it was such an eye opening experience. Again, having grown up in a little college town, I had not met a whole lot of folks from the South, had not a whole lot of folks who didn't share my good liberal values. And so it was really great for me to go through basic training with just, a cross section of America. And then um, went to what they called journalism school, which was 8 years of learning not to, 8 years, excuse me, 8 weeks of learning how not to split infinitives and to take photographs. And then spent, 4 years in the Army, got out as an E5. I was in from 76 to 80 and managed to keep the Soviets at bay with pen and typewriter.
Hey,
Nice.
Yeah.
everybody, it's what happens. Somebody's got to do it, right?
Well, there you go. There you go. So I was really lucky, was able to write a humor column and, do a lot of general feature stuff, nominated for awards, all that stuff, but also developed a fairly nasty heroin habit while I was in the Army. And this is back in 78 and the military seems to go back and forth between really believing that what it needs to do is rid itself of drug and alcohol users to believing that treatment is the answer. I was lucky enough that when I was in, the pendulum had swung toward treatment. And so my company commander, when I went to him and said, Captain Baines, I've been spending a lot of money on heroin lately, and I'm thinking maybe I've got a problem. Instead of preparing discharge papers, sent me off to rehab. Fortunately for me, although the rehab was complete and utter nonsense involving scream therapy and sitting in a circle and screaming at pillows, I discovered that my taste for heroin could be satisfied with Johnny Walker Black. And so instead of being a heroin addict, I became an alcoholic, which was much more acceptable in the military at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, so I could go on filling up the next 2 hours, but let's fast forward a bit. Um, by 2007, I had managed to find a fair amount of professional success and had managed to create a fair amount of personal tragedy, the kind of jackassery that comes when you're drinking. So I couldn't afford Johnny Walker Black long ago, given that up. Was now and not even drinking brand name mouthwash, but drinking like generic mouthwash, which did give me minty fresh vomit, but other than that, not a great way to live. So because I'm a veteran, and I'd never used my veterans benefits. I'd used them to go to college and used them to buy a house, but had never used the VA, but knew that there was such a thing as a VA medical center in Manchester, New Hampshire. In a moment of clarity, I walked into urgent care, the VA's equivalent of the emergency room, and said to the nurse behind the counter, "Hi, my name's Keith Howard. I'm a veteran and I don't really want to be alive anymore." And from that moment forward, all of the resources of the United States government were brought to bear in helping me discover how to live a sober life. And I have nothing but incredible praise for the VA and my experience with, in particular, the Manchester, New Hampshire VA and White River Junction Hospital in Vermont. But just, it's awful easy to crap on the VA. My experience has been just incredibly positive, and I have no complaints in terms of my personal treatment by the VA.
And that's very encouraging to hear you say, because I interview a lot of veterans these days, and you can see it all over social media, and no one really has anything positive to say about the VA, although they are working very hard and diligently every single day to do everything they possibly can. And it seems like, unfortunately, all you hear is the negative stuff. They don't really promote, or people don't, they're not screaming at the top of the mountain about good things that VA do for people. So it's really awesome to hear that story. And I know Bennett, working for the VA, is a member out on the streets doing good on the behalf of the VA every single day. So thanks for that. That's very uplifting to hear.
Well, and if I had been treated badly, I'd be saying, "Gee, those are a bunch of skunks." I can only report my own experience, and again, I've got the best and most human doctors I've ever had in my life. I have nothing but positive experiences to share with the VA. So from the minute that I walked into that emergency room, I was put onto an ambulance, taken to White River Junction, medically detoxed off of alcohol, introduced to a program of recovery, which is still central to my life, and got my life back thanks to the taxpayers of the United States, and through the VA. So that was 8.5 years ago now. So about 3 years ago, I took a part-time case management position at Liberty House, and then through a series of coincidences, became executive director and have been executive director for the last 3 years. So I think that kind of brings us up to the present. And again, I got no relationship with the VA in terms of like anybody. I have nobody to be sucking up to. Every day I work with people from the VA, and whether it be VASH social workers, whether it be peer support specialists out doing the work in the trenches, every person that I work with at the VA is a stand-up person. And I'm sure there are some jerks that I just don't happen to run into. But these are all people that I feel have veterans' backs and are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, so the Liberty House, how long? So that's been in existence. You came into that and it was already in existence. Did you utilize any of the Liberty House's services at the time when you were transitioning?
I did not. No, let's see. I don't want to name names, but after I got out of the VA hospital, I did move into a shelter/transitional living facility, not in Manchester, not Liberty House. And there, honestly, felt like I was being treated like a number. And there was a lot of lip service given to things, but I felt like I was treated as less than a full human being. And so when I came to Liberty House, one of my immediate goals was that nobody who walks through the door here, vet or non-vet, wealthy donor or somebody in need of food or clothing, would be treated with contempt, would be treated with anything less than regard and respect. And we don't always manage to achieve that goal, but that is always the goal.
Yeah, so how many transitioning veterans do you currently have in the Liberty House today?
We've got 10 folks. We got 10 beds. They're almost always full. When they're not full, it's because we're waiting a few days for somebody to be released, either from treatment or be released from prisoner jail. So.
Do you run completely off of private funds, or do you get money from like grant per diem or any of that?
No, we're not a grant per diem program. So grant per diem is program, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bennett. VA program that gives programs a certain amount of money per night for each bed that is filled. We're not a grant per diem program because we're located in a house built in the 1920s. And if you don't mind, I do have a quick story to tell about the story of Liberty House, which we're going to be celebrating in a couple of weeks on February 3rd. A young man who grew up in this house back in the 1930s. Then, so had his Christmases here and his birthdays here. Then went off to World War II. And while traveling from the United States to England to get ready for the invasion of Germany, his ship was torpedoed in the North Atlantic. And you may have heard of the Chaplain ship. It's a ship that, as it was going down, there were 4 chaplains, two Protestant, 1 Catholic, 1 Jewish, who were handing out life vests. And they ran out of life vests for the men, so each of them took their vests off and handed them to enlisted men so that they would be able to survive. And then the 4 chaplains went down with the ship. And that's the same thing that happened to the young man who grew up in this house. His sister inherited the house, and then when she died in 1990, left it in trust in perpetuity as long as it's being used to help veterans. And so right now we pay $1 per year to rent this house. And as long as veterans go on being served here, that's what the rent will always be. So It's just amazing to me that what would have seemed like a meaningless death in the North Atlantic now continues to act as a safe harbor for vets to be rescued out of the cold of a New England winter.
And that's a very powerful story. And I mean, I'm from this area, and I've heard of the Liberty House, but never heard of that story. Wow, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but you had asked me a question, and then I think I kind of pinwheeled off into that. Do either of you remember what the question was, or should I just go on talking?
I just asked if it was part of if you guys got grant per diem funds.
No,
that's all I was asking.
Okay, no, we don't get grant per diem funds, and I don't know if you'd like to start talking about funding or whether you'd like to get more background. Your call there, Eddie and Bennett.
Yeah, so I think well before we get into kind of the story that piqued the interest and the story that's kind of collected a lot of media attention, at least locally, I do want to kind of really touch on, if you could share with us the life cycle that is, the veteran. So like a veteran finds him or herself out on the street. So how does that work? How do they come into the Liberty House? How, what is their treatment like while they're there? How long do they stay? Like, just describe for us the life of the veteran going through your program.
Well, easiest for me if I just tell the story of a couple of different folks to show, if that's okay with you, if you've got time.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So just about 2 years ago, as an example, I went down to a heroin treatment facility in Stonington, Connecticut, called, I believe, the Stonington Institute, and there met with a vet by the name of Doug, who had done 3 combat tours, 2 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, retired first sergeant, and who was battling with heroin. And when I met him in Stonington, his only hope was that when he got out of the program, he'd be able to stay clean and stay sober for a while. He could not envision remaining drug and alcohol free for a long time, because it had been a long time for him since he'd been clean and sober. But we talked. He agreed that a place like Liberty House would be right for him. So when he was discharged from there, came up here, got immediately involved in the house because we provide food and clothing for anybody who comes to our door, not just vets. We get in a ton of donations of food and of clothing, which we appreciate incredibly, but we get so much in that we are able to distribute it to anybody who needs it. And part of a New Liberty House residents, I don't want to say indoctrination, but training is getting to understand how you go about gathering food for somebody, gathering clothing for anybody who needs it, so that from the minute a man or woman comes in here, he or she is giving back to people who were there, who are where they were, just days before. So Doug came, got very involved with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, just kept on doing the right thing day after day. And, within 3 months, his life had managed to start to turn around and got himself a job. He'd managed to keep his CDL, his commercial truck driving license, got a job, and moved out of Liberty House, but still kept coming back to mentor folks who were living here. And last November, Veterans Day, we had a breakfast to which about 200 folks came, senator, congressperson, mayor, and then a bunch of supporters. Doug spoke for about 15 minutes about how Liberty House had changed his life and had managed to help him get some kind of stability. And then at that time, I was able to ask Doug to join our board of directors, not simply because he's a former resident, but because he is now a man of dignity and distinction, which is our goal for every man or woman that goes through here. So then we have stories that are nowhere near as dramatic, but of folks who come here freshly clean and sober, whether making the decision while being on the streets or whether completing a rehab program, and come in, do the right thing, go to meetings, come to recognize that life can be different than the hell they've created for themselves, and are now living in apartments. Honestly, the VASH program. And Bennett, do you know exactly what that acronym stands for?
What's funny is I don't, and that's the program I work for.
Okay. So, well, let's call it.
It's got something that's like Veterans Assistance something housing.
Supported housing.
Supported housing, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, what it is a voucher that folks can use to help subsidize their rent, so that they're paying 30% of their income for rent, no matter how much or how little they're making. And that has been a tremendous godsend for homeless vets, so that we've got probably 2, maybe 3 dozen folks living in apartments who could not otherwise afford them, who are working, paying 30% of their income for rent, paying their taxes, and instead of drawing off of the public trough, are contributing to it. And so it is a really, really great program.
It is an amazing program, and truthfully, that's one of my biggest jobs at the VA, is getting guys into that. But that's a program that truly, we talk about how good or bad the VA is, especially recently. And one thing that the VA, just like you had said earlier, is really good at is allowing guys to get back up on their feet. Their feet. Not just guys, but gals as well.
Yeah.
That's one place that the VA is absolutely succeeding. Thank goodness.
So. Yeah, and it is so exciting to go to somebody's apartment that they've gotten with a VASH certificate, and go over there to have dinner with a newly housed vet and see the pride that he or she has in the place that they thought they would never be able to afford.
Right. It is pretty awesome.
Yeah. And
how big of a relationship does Liberty House have with the Stonington Institute?
not a big relationship. I don't
Oh,
even know how Doug heard about us. So I've been
okay.
down there a couple of times. I was very impressed with it, but I don't know
Yeah,
a lot
I
about
was
it.
I was just because I actually have a good friend of mine who had was part of the Starlight program that they have there, which is
Yes. Yep.
actually active duty military inpatient rehab.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't realize that there are programs out there, even if you're still active duty, that that can help you, and that place is phenomenal. So
Yeah, my experience there was really great, but not tremendous experience. No.
So I got a question. So does the Liberty House take an active role in terms of going out and seeking like homeless veterans or veterans in need, or do you guys just solely get referred to by, like the VA or peer support specialists? How does that work?
Well, because we provide food and clothing for, probably between 75 and 100 folks a week, we are a, a very um, big landmark on the homeless scene, so that if somebody is homeless, he or she knows about Liberty House. Um, One of the things that sets us apart in terms of food distribution is we don't take down any identifying information at all. At most food banks, you need to go in and, give your name, maybe the last four of your social, but they want to make sure that you're not coming back too often, and they keep a record. We just assume that if somebody's coming for food, that they need food. And so word of mouth is one way that homeless vets hear about us. The VA is another way. And then we have good relationships with jails, prisons, psychiatric hospitals within probably a 50-mile radius of here. So it's not just the VA. I'd say probably a third of our folks come directly street, a third from jail or prison, and a third from either psychiatric hospitals or drug and alcohol rehab places.
Mm. Are you seeing an increase in veterans in need from we call it the GWAT era, the Global War on Terror? So the last 12 or so years of veterans serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. Are you seeing more and more of those demographic folks?
Oddly, no. I think, and if anything I'm about to say is just conjecture, but I think that the government the government in general, VA in particular, but the government in general has done a much better job of providing support services to folks after they get out. But also, if you're in your 20s, even early 30s, you can be kind of bumming around, couch surfing from place to place, and people don't see you as being homeless. Like almost everybody in his or her 20s has either been the guy on the couch or has had somebody sleeping on his couch as he's traveling through. Once people get into their 40s and 50s, though, nobody really wants a 50-year-old guy hanging around, and all of your age peers, have families, have responsibilities. So I think that probably that pig in the python isn't going to explode for another 5 or 10 years, and then you'll discover that guys who are now in their late 30s, early 40s um, are becoming a huge new collection of homeless vets.
That's a huge insight, because I've been doing a lot of studying and research on this exact question. And I completely and utterly agree with you. I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better, especially with the GWOT guys. They are still resilient.
Yeah.
And they're, even if they do have substance abuse issues, a lot of times it's a functional abuse situation because they're still young,
Yep.
and able to kind of, and just like all three of us understand, you know, I'd say a lot of guys, regardless of era or whatnot, were functional, either alcoholics or at least functioning alcoholics within the military,
Yeah.
at some point or time. So at the end of the day, we're just able to hide it better, the younger guys. I know that I couldn't anymore, but I'm in my 40s now. So
Right.
it's one of those things, is the resiliency breaks down. So I can answer that question too, Eddie, that I guarantee you in 5 to 8, 10 years, you're going to see a huge explosion, because it's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately.
Right. And I think along with that, when you're within 5 years of ETS, people still see you as being a veteran. Just as an example, once you get to be out of the service for 8 or 10 years, that has receded into the background in the eyes of society. So they're not cutting you the slack that they might have earlier. Now you're just kind of a troublemaker.
Right.
Well, and one of the things too is that the VA is a little different now than it was a little while ago. This seeing is, even if you do not have combat related illnesses, but you are considered a combat veteran, you get health care from the VA, 100% health care for 5 years after ETS. So that's another thing, is that if guys need health care, they've got it as long as they carry that combat veteran moniker.
Right.
And that can also aid them in their, whatever you want to call it. I mean, obviously, guys that are service connected, they have health care regardless. But if you're not service connected, sometimes it, can be difficult. But as long as you're a combat veteran, now you have health care as a GWOT veteran.
Yep.
So that also can bring it down. I mean, I've told Eddie the story as well, that I like the fact that you brought up the story about the first sergeant, because it really does span across all ranks, colors, creeds, branches, all of it. As a first sergeant, who would ever expect a first sergeant to be a drug addict?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I mean, like I've told Eddie in the past too, I have a lieutenant colonel that I know who is a retired Army commander who was addicted to heroin. Same kind of thing. Just so it's definitely one of those epidemics that's kind of underlying, and people don't realize it's there necessarily. So.
Yeah, well, and when you look at the ways that pain is treated, when you're talking about people who are in pain, and the first thing that happens is they're given pain medication. It's so easy to develop a habit of just kind of getting used to that buzz that you get when you're using any kind of opiate.
Especially nowadays, when the best drugs that they have for pain are opiates.
Right.
So it's not a far cry from Oxycontin to heroin, and heroin's cheap, and unfortunately heroin's cheaper.
Right.
I mean, it's no less addictive, or no less, just because it's a prescription doesn't make it okay. It's just one of those things that people don't necessarily correlate it with an addiction.
Right.
So.
Right. You take it as prescribed, and then you develop a taste for it. And then when your script runs out, you still have the taste, and you look and you say, if I buy oxys on the street, I'm going to have to spend, $120. I can get some heroin for $25. I'd be an idiot to go on buying oxys.
Yes. And that is one of the shortfallings of the VA.
Yes.
That I see is they're very quick to. I think their pain management system needs a little updating, and you know, no, not here nor there, but that's one of the shortfallings, because they're not perfect, just like any other bureaucracy. They do have their holes that need to be filled and improved. So I see that as one of them.
So would you find, Keith, that, I mean, how do veterans finally get to the point where they say, because we all here know that veterans are very prideful individuals, right? We served a higher purpose, a larger calling than ourselves. We served a great country with a tremendous history. People depended on us for everything, and now all of a sudden we find ourselves in a place of need, where we can't help ourselves, and in order to get that help, we've got to swallow some pride and we've got to ask for help, and many really really struggle with that. So for those that might be listening today that are probably in that situation, what would you say to them?
Um, it's hard for me to tell anybody how to get over pride because um, I had a tremendous amount of pride even when I had nothing to be proud of. Um, and when I was living on the street, even though I was drinking mouthwash, I proud of the fact that I never drank Sterno and was never going to sink to that level. So it is hard to know how to tell folks to overcome pride, but I will say that um, there are folks at the VA, and I suspect at veterans organizations around the country who are not going to sit in any kind of judgment. And if you're lucky, you'll run into people who have experienced the same kind of things that you're going through. And I don't mean just people sitting in a waiting room waiting for help, but in the service providers. And that's, one thing that Liberty House does have going for it is that we've got at least some staff who have been in those shoes of need and have had to battle pride and are not going to sit in judgment on you.
Yeah, because I'm sure you see that too, Bennett, huh?
I completely, and I forgot that I had it muted, so I was talking to you guys and you couldn't hear me. So, yes, I find that the pride thing gets in the way on multiple levels. You have the pride of, I am a, hard charging Army dog or Marine Corps guy or whatever, whatever branch you're from and whatever MOSs, you always have your hard chargers who believe that they're that they'll never fall victim to this. I have control of it. I can do this, and they're too prideful to ask for help, first off. But then you have the pride part of it too that runs in and kind of taints things, where you've got the guys that don't think. And it's kind of funny that this comes up. I had a big discussion on Facebook this morning about allowing non-veterans to help you as a veteran, because just because you're a veteran doesn't mean that only veterans understand you. Non-veterans might not understand what you've been through, but they understand trauma and they understand the basal issues that you may have. And not allowing the door to at least stay ajar to help outside influences that are not veterans aid you in your transition or your recovery is a bit ridiculous. And I find that type of pride gets in the way a lot too. And then it even goes down to MOS, where, oh, he's not a grunt, he's a pogue. The Pogues can't help me. What the heck have they ever done? Da, 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 da. And I just find that kind of as insecurity and whatnot. But yes, I think it all has to do with pride. And hey, if you're a religious person, pride is not necessarily a good thing. So
right, and we can all remember the words of Pulp Fiction: "Fuck pride." But
absolutely,
that's right.
Because what has pride ever really gotten you?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having pride and being prideful and being, proud of your unit, proud of
Correct.
your accomplishments, proud of your soldiers, your deployment. I
Right.
mean, pride is a good thing, but when it gets in the way, when it stands in the way of you achieving your fullest potential, or seeking the help that you need, or even helping those that are in need, because oftentimes people look at people in need and say, oh, well, that's their fault. They did this to themselves. Why should I help them, kind of a thing. So, it's very easy to pass judgment. It's a lot harder to stick out your hand and say, hey, do you need some help? You
Pride
know what I
needs to
mean?
come with a good, healthy dose of humility.
Yeah, right,
So,
right.
at the end of the day, that's really what it's about.
Right.
Yep.
And I know that one thing that we try to um, pound into guys' heads or people's heads when they're living here is that when folks come to the door in need, that there but for the grace of God go any of us, and there went many of us in the past. And so getting through a tough spot and then being in a position where you can give back, where you can be helping people who are where you were, is incredibly empowering. And that
Mm.
might be a way of um, helping to overcome pride, is to appeal to pride and say, you know what, if you're willing to accept this help now, you'll be strong enough so that you can help other people.
Right. It gives people an opportunity to find purpose in their life
Right,
again.
right.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I
So,
mean, look at me. I'm kind of an example of that as well. So it's
mhm.
you know uh, definitely one of those things that I know Keith completely understands it, and a lot of guys too as well. So
Yeah, well,
Mhm.
it is really good to be in a position where you can help other folks, whether it's vets, whether it's non-vets, just like having $5 in your pocket that you can throw into the Salvation Army when you walk out at Christmas time. That feels really good when you've been in a place where $5 would have been like a huge windfall to you.
and plus
Mhm.
I know like Keith will completely understand and agree with this as well, and you too, Eddie. And I'm going to kind of go like a broken record because I've said this a million times: is you can't be sad if you're being useful.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And it's veterans need to understand, and non-veterans as well. If you have traumatic issues and depression and anxiety, one of the best medicines that there is to help others like yourself get to a place that even if you're struggling paycheck to paycheck, you have a house, you have a home over, or a roof over your head, and you have a hot meal. Is if somebody's that doesn't, can and you can help that person lift them up just far enough that they do as well, that's very therapeutic. Um, and I know for me, it's one of the things that helps me get through every day.
Yeah. And, when I first got sober, I was talking with a fella, and he, when you do get sober and you're talking with other sober people, you hear like a lot of cliches. But one thing that I heard that has stuck with me ever since is a grateful heart will never find the need to drink, which is much like what you were just saying, Bennett. And I I am not a big God guy by any means, but I do pray probably 25 or 30 times a day, and it's always a very simple prayer, and that is thank you, God. And not thanking just for good stuff that happens, but thank you that I can be cold. Thank you that I can be hungry right now. Thank you that I got food to take care of the hunger and a coat to put on against the cold. But just expressing that gratitude, and that's something that we do try to encourage folks to develop here at Liberty House, is a sense of gratitude. And not gratitude
Mm.
to me or to Liberty House, but just gratitude to the universe that, hey, I'm getting a second shot at things.
This kind of goes
Mm.
hand in hand with a lot of things we've been talking about, Eddie.
Yeah, it does. Very.
Especially like
Yep.
gratitude and forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those are the two biggest things. Period.
Yeah. In the back of my head, I'm like, oh, Keith must have listened to that episode, and I'm like, nope, I haven't. I haven't even released that
No,
one
no,
yet.
no. I'll be honest. The episode I listened to in its entirety was the Bo Bergdahl episode, and other than that, I've just been kind of dipping in. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so we got some episodes coming up that talks exactly about what you're saying about
Well,
gratitude.
Friday's episode
And
kind of did too, because of the
yeah, it did.
meditation.
Yep.
It just kind of glazed over it, but yeah.
Right. So I wanted to talk, Keith, about kind of what's happened recently, and this might be brand new to Bennett. I'm not sure because this is really kind of portrayed through our local media here in New Hampshire. But so we talked briefly at the top of the cast about kind of funding and how that works a little bit. And I'll be honest, I'm very novice to the way all that works. So Bennett can kind of help navigate that. But so it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll let you explain a little bit more detail. This federal funding organization called HUD, HUD stands for Housing and Urban Development, kind of has some edicts or some provisions within the legal terms that you, in order to receive federal funding, transitional houses must have a housing first approach. Basically, bring somebody in and still let them abuse drugs and alcohol. And you're taking the stance of nope. Our transition house here at Liberty House needs to be one that is free of substance abuse and that kind of a thing. Am I right in saying kind of this?
You are right. I think that I don't want to be too harsh on people that subscribe to the philosophy of housing first, which HUD has taken as its own, because it's a
And so does
philosophy,
Vash as well. I'm sorry,
and
I
so
don't
does
mean to
Vash
interrupt.
as well, right? Yep. And it's a philosophy that was first tried out on chronically mentally ill and chronically homeless folks in greater St. Louis, and it had great success. So that the idea is, um, if you give a person a house or give them housing and you provide them with intensive case management, that once they are safe and off the streets, they'll be better able to decide on their own to get clean and sober. And they did have tremendous results with that population. Again, chronically mentally ill, chronically homeless. Our position here at Liberty House is that the American veteran is neither chronically mentally ill nor chronically homeless. And by that, I just mean that every single vet who has ever completed basic training has known that sense of pride and accomplishment that comes on graduation day when you feel like you are stronger than you've ever been before, you feel like you are a better problem solver than you've ever been before, you feel like you are part of something bigger and better than you've ever been part of before. And our goal here at Liberty House is to help people recapture that feeling that they are able to overcome life's adversity. If you're talking about chronically mentally ill folks, some of them have never had a period of stability, have never had a period of accomplishment. And I'm not sitting in judgment. I'm just saying that if you are, if you develop schizophrenia when you're 16 or 17, chances are you've not had that stability and success that every single veteran has had for at least a period of time.
Because
And
chances are you're not serving in the military.
right, right. If you're chronically mentally ill, unless you have a really cool mental illness, but okay, thank you for laughing. I was attempting to
Yeah.
be humorous, and then I realized
I got
I got nothing.
no. I got that. I was like, you just described like me and all my
Right,
buddies.
right. I mean, yeah. I mean,
Right.
if you're a sociopath, you can get into the military. But
We probably all have a little bit of that tendency, but
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So our belief is that for folks who have had a period of stability and success in their lives, that allowing people to go on using drugs and alcohol not only going to make further progress difficult for them, also going to tear down the fabric of the rest of the house. I don't know if you guys have ever been fishing with crabs, like in saltwater, bucket of crabs. Yes, no,
Mm-mm.
okay.
Yes,
So,
I
have.
haven't.
Yes.
okay. So back in April, I was in San Francisco with my daughters and um, happened to get looking at a bucket of crabs that a fellow was using to fish and noticed that when you have crabs in a bucket, if one of them tries to crawl out of the bucket, the other crabs reach up and pull the crab back down. So even though they are basically just going to be fish bait, the crabs pull the other crab down. Um, and that's what happens when you have drug and alcohol, folks who are in early recovery, who are around people who are using, is that um, no junkie wants to see other junkies get clean. No alcoholic wants to see other drinkers find success because it shows in sharp contrast the mess that they've made of their lives. And so we couldn't allow this to be a crab bucket where people are pulling each other down to the bottom. Instead, we want to be a place where people are pulling each other up to the top.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Mm.
So, given that HUD has embraced housing first, and Liberty House had until January 1st of this year gotten between $40,000 and $50,000 a year from HUD. Um, we could have gone on, we could have like finessed things for another couple of years and, hope that nobody was going to look too closely. But instead, I went to our board of directors back in August and said, this is the direction that things have headed. We need to step away from federal money. Um, and that's about 15% of our annual budget, that, say $40,000.
Right, which is substantial.
It is substantial. So, and here, I do not want to hear any talk of St. Keith or anything because I'm sick and goddamn tired of that. But um, I did say to the board of directors that was concerned about taking such a big hit that I would take a 50% pay cut until we had made up the missing $40,000 in um, increased donations. And not that 50% of my income is nowhere near 40 grand. I mean, I'm living on 45 or was living on 45,000 a year. Now I'm living on 22.5. Um, but I believe so strongly in this that until we have made up that missing 40 grand, I'm living on half rations. So,
Mm.
And which is pretty awesome. I mean, the housing first model it has its place. You just have to think of like Maslow's hierarchy and some
yep,
kind of things. It makes sense, obviously. But if you're especially trying to run a group home, um, it's very detrimental. So
yep,
I totally commend you, and it's very good that you're just not willing to compromise your own ethics just for the dollars from the man, I guess
right,
you could
Mm-hmm.
say, and
right.
that's to be commended.
Yep. So
Mm.
that is what we're doing. And we have been really lucky that, I wrote an op-ed for the Manchester Union Leader, which is New Hampshire's statewide paper, a couple of weeks ago, and that's the story that you saw, Eddie. Um,
Yep.
then the Union Leader followed that up with an editorial the next day talking about how they completely agreed and commended us for what we're doing. Then I was on New Hampshire Public Radio for an hour um, talking about homelessness in general, veteran homelessness in particular, and then us stepping away from federal funds. And then we were lucky enough that the Fox station out of Boston picked up the story, sent a team up here, and gave us, a nice 3-minute piece so that we have started to see um, the results as people become aware of what we're doing. We are seeing increased donations, and my hope is that by June or so, I will be back on full ration. So
It's fantastic.
That's awesome.
Hey, I'm sitting here looking at your staff. So, on a lighter note, what could you tell me about your public relations, the girl that works public relations for you, Lucy?
Oh, look, okay. I was going to say, because there's a woman who does. I was.
Well, that's Lindsay, right?
That's Lindsay, and I was
Right. I'm
afraid
actually
that you were
talking
like,
about Lucy.
okay, yeah, Lucy is my dog. Um, Lucy is a great dog who is here pretty much whenever I'm here. So between 60 and 70 hours a week, she greets people here. And she and I are taking part in a year-long experiment. And I don't know that, Eddie, you and I had even talked about this. Did we talk about the converted cargo trailer?
No, it's in the article, and that was where I was going to go next. I really want to hear this story. This is pretty cool.
Okay, so Lucy and I did most of the thinking about it about a year ago. Um, had been reading about how all up and down the West Coast, going into the Southwest and into the South, there had been advocates for the homeless who have been converting enclosed cargo trailers. So the kind of cargo trailer 8 feet wide, 20 feet long that a plumber might use to bring equipment out to a job site.
Well,
So
we know them all in the military as Connex boxes.
okay, Connex boxes, yes.
Yeah, it's basically exactly what it is.
Yep. So had been converting those into livable, dwellings. But nobody in New England, no organization that I could find in New England had been doing anything like this. So, because nobody had been doing it and it seemed like a good idea, this is February, March, I went to the same board that gave up federal funds, 6 months ahead, 6 months before this, and said that I would like to have Liberty House, not as an organization, but as residents here, take on the project of converting a cargo trailer into livable space, then have somebody live in it for a year to demonstrate not just that it was livable, but that it was actually likable. And so got a group of the guys who were living here at the time to donate a lot of labor. And we managed to get a fair number of donations to underwrite the project, and then the rest we put into our budget. But when I was looking for the right person to live in this trailer, um, I was lucky enough at that time that I was trying to consider whether I wanted to continue living in an apartment or whether I wanted to think about buying a house. And as it turns out, Lucy and I were the perfect candidates for living in this box because we had other options. If you just take somebody off the street and say, "How would you like to live in a warm, dry box?" Well, versus being on the street, of course I'd rather live there. So because Lucy and I had other options, we were the right people. So we moved in last June 21st, which is Father's Day or the summer solstice, depending upon whether you're a Hallmark kind of person or a pagan kind of person. Um, and we'll be living in there until June 20th of 2016. And so far, it has been really great for me. It has been okay for Lucy. So
That's awesome. So is this box near the Liberty
that's
House?
about 20 minutes away in a town called Raymond. Um,
Raymond.
and I
Yep.
do have to say, and Raymond's on. Well, anybody else in the rest of the country not going to give a good goddamn about this, but it's on Route 101, halfway between Manchester and Portsmouth, and the um, Board of Selectmen in Raymond has just taken us under their wing and has been so supportive, so that when they first heard about this, they gave a directive to the town officials that the officials' job was to find ways to make this work, not to find ways to block it. And we've got nothing but support and help from them. So it has been a great time, although, when I got home last night, all of the water in the place had frozen, so I had to turn on the um, portable propane heaters and then take water jugs and put them on top of the heaters just to be able to get some water to wash up with.
So it has its
And right,
shortcomings, is what you're
It
saying.
does.
At least the design that you guys have, right?
Yeah, and that's the nice thing, is that this is just proof of concept as we go forward. And so let me just finish up with the construction of this. So one fella in particular, who would prefer that his name not be used, put in about 150 hours of unpaid volunteer labor. So at the end of the year experiment, the trailer will belong to him, and he's going to be moving. He's again, a vet, former Liberty House resident, planning on moving back to his hometown, which is a small town here in New Hampshire where there are no apartments available, and then living in this while he reconnects with people in town and tries to figure out what to do next. So,
Well, just as a resource for you, Keith, I have a friend who is actually a veteran down in Henderson, North Carolina. His name is John Massey. Him and his
yeah.
wife Cole run a organization called the Veterans Healing Farm,
Oh,
and they have two shipping containers. One of which they did not convert a company that was trying to convert shipping containers into usable housing for FEMA. They were trying to get a FEMA contract to build. You know how FEMA had the
yeah.
trailers after Katrina and whatnot. Well, they were trying to get a contract with FEMA to build shipping containers for them to have as emergency housing. Well, he was able to purchase this with money that he had won from a business plan competition. And got it. And it's basically a barracks with running water and all kinds of stuff, but in a 40-foot shipping container. Well, they bought another shipping container and have converted it themselves into a very like construction. So that is a resource that you could possibly
Yeah.
look
Now,
into.
what is the name again?
It is the Veterans Healing Farm.
Okay.
And they kind of use it as they teach uh, disabled veterans. It's basically life through community and
Yeah.
teaching them how to uh, grow their own crops and whatnot, and basically be self-sustaining members of society, and then provide fresh food to their communities and yada yada yada. So they're amazing people. They're a nonprofit down in Henderson, North Carolina. And I would be happy to send you their contact info. And I'm sure that if you have questions and whatnot, that they would be more than happy to talk to you about options for these
Wonderful.
containers.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay.
See, that's what it's all about.
that's right.
And see, they're I love their motto, and it's cultivating life through community. And it just, because they're a farm cultivating it, it's just a play on words. It's fantastic. So
Yeah, no, that
And
is very cool.
And once we get offline, Keith, I'm gonna get the address, if you wouldn't mind, to your your shanty house there in Raymond. And I would love to come out, take some pictures, meet you in
Oh
person,
yeah,
maybe
that'd be great.
get some short videos and get that up on my website as well,
That'd be great.
to kind of help spread the word and share the story.
Wonderful. Now, if you do go to the Liberty House website, libertyhousenh.org, there is a Google 360 treatment of the box. So Google sent out a Google 360 photographer so that you can actually, just like if you're going to be booking a room at a nice hotel or going to a spa or whatever, it gives you 360, like a fisheye look at the place. So if
Oh,
you go to the
nice.
website, it's
Okay.
there. Yeah.
That's very cool.
I'm
And
actually looking
you
at it
also,
right now.
I'm trying to find it.
So you also have a podcast.
Yeah.
Yes, we do have a podcast, yeah, which is done by Lindsay. Um, Lindsay Elitharp, who is, I forget, if you have our website open, what is her official title? Does
Marketing
anybody?
and media specialist.
Marketing and media specialist, and she does a gazillion things more than that. But she does have a podcast, which is, um, it had been bi-weekly. We've taken a brief hiatus, going to be getting back to that, but it is interviews with current and former residents at Liberty House. It is not a fundraising thing at all. We got no, I mean, we like getting money as executive director. I should say, yeah, please send your checks to 75 West Baker Street, Manchester, New Hampshire, 03103. But what it is a chance for people who have not had their voices heard to have a microphone in front of them. And so it
Called
is
Beyond
this,
Spare Change.
it's called Beyond Spare Change, yes. So you can listen to episodes on our website. You can go to iTunes and subscribe to it. Um, just incredibly moving and funny stories. I would recommend starting off with there's a fellow named George who has a two-part episode. He has had a Keystone Cop's life of crime, been in and out of prison, has great stories to tell, and now is on the straight and narrow and doing really well, and is actually a staff member here at Liberty House now. So, although he's not pictured on our page, he is in charge of um, organizing all of our donations, and that's a paid position for him. So
That's awesome. Definitely going to check that out, and I'm going to include all of the links to everything we talked about in the show notes of this page. And if you wouldn't mind, I would like to put a permanent place on the front page of my website for Liberty House for people to come and learn more about you and what you do, and to donate and get involved, even if they live on the other side of the country. You've definitely got something worthwhile to give back to and be part of. So this is really
well,
cool.
and that is one of the things that we try to do with the podcast is like we can provide food and clothing locally. We can't say to somebody in Tacoma, Washington, here you go, here's a winter hat. Um, but the podcast does provide hope and stories that are pretty universal. I mean, even though they're set in
Mm,
Manchester, New Hampshire, they are the same stories of thousands of other veterans who have been homeless. So,
right, right. That's awesome.
yep. So, so we are always looking for um, new projects that are outside of the norm. So, whether it be the Liberty Homes Project, which is what we call the box that Lucy and I are living in, or the podcast, we want to keep on doing stuff that is going to make life interesting and, you know, give hope to people who have forgotten what hope feels like.
Right, right. That's very cool. Hey, thanks, Keith, so much. Bennett, do you have anything you'd like to ask Keith before we close
No, I
out
think
today?
I've got it all. And I have your contact email, Keith. So I will send you a ton of info on some different things that I feel might be good for you to look at.
That
If you don't
sounds
mind.
great.
If you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
mind.
No. That'd be great. That'd be great.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
And if in the future you are ever hard up enough for a guest, I would be more than happy to come on again. This has really been a lot of fun with you two.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. We'll definitely take you up on that. You've got, like I said, you're just, it's a great story. You're extremely hilarious. I've been very entertained throughout this entire interview. And it's more than just an interview, right? I feel like, shame on me. You guys are literally 20 minutes, and the Liberty House is about 20 minutes from where I live. And I didn't hear about it or know about it until I saw that article. So now that you're in my radar, I'm going to do everything I can to help spread the word and awareness, at least in the local
Good.
area. And like you said, with the podcasts, that's what I found. That's kind of the reason why I started this podcast as well, is because I found myself helping, my friends and family within my little circle, and thought, you know what, I got to figure out a way to do what I can to help as many people as possible. And you really can't do that any other effective way than with some type of medium like an online blog site or a podcast. So I'm totally with you with that. It's just there's so many people out there that need help, and it's tough because people that are homeless probably aren't jamming out to podcasts with their iPhones, but people that are listening to this, they can reach out and help those that are homeless and veterans that are in need.
Right.
You know
Oh,
what
yeah.
I mean? Where can folks find more about you and what you've got going on? We'll start there.
So if me is Liberty House, it would be libertyhousenh.org, and we're located in Manchester, New Hampshire. If there's anybody out there, any homeless vet who has some hankering to get in off the streets, the only number that I use for work is my cell phone number, and that is 603-361-6266. I would prefer that homeless person be a woman between the age of 45 and 60, fairly attractive and having low standards. But
I love it.
if there is anybody out there, any vet out there, who is hoping to get off the streets, and you're anywhere near Manchester, or if you just want to get a word of encouragement, feel free to give me a call.
I was just
That's
going to say our
awesome.
next
Very
venture,
cool.
Eddie, I guess we're going to have a veterans website for dating.
Right, there you go. Yeah.
Nice.
A dating podcast for veterans.
There you go.
There we go. Nice. Oh, that is so cool. All right. Well, thanks, Bennett, for coming on short notice, but I appreciate your ability to come on and share your insight and knowledge, especially with your experience working every single day with the demographic that we're talking about today, which is, the veterans in need. Thank you, Keith, for coming on and sharing your time. I know you're a busy guy and you got a lot going on, and it's very, very exciting that you're so close so I can get a chance to get to know you personally and be involved with everything you've got going on. You can find everything we talked about, including all the links to this episode in the show notes. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. Also go over and check out the Liberty House podcast as well. Those links will be on changeyourpov.com as well. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can email me at eddie@changeyourpov.com. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Change Your POV podcast with Eddie Lazary. Check out more content by going to changeyourpov.com. And remember, your ability and willingness to change your point of view will open doors of opportunity.